study session of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
Chairperson Zurcher,
Here
Vice Chairperson King,
is absent.
Commissioner Laney,
Here.
Commissioner Griffiths,
Here.
Commissioner Evans,
Here.
Commissioner Rankin,
Here.
Commissioner Rutherford.
Here.
All right. Moving on to announcements. Any staff announcements? I do want to announce that Commissioner King is absent this evening. She has tendered her resignation. It's not official, though, until council actually accepts her resignation. So we will have a vacancy on planning and zoning. With that, we'll go right on to discussion items. Item number 4, I just want to reiterate that no action will be taken this evening. There will be no votes taken. So the first thing on the agenda is item 4A, review Planning and Zoning Commission bylaws as compared to Town Code Article 13-28. Who wants to take this first, Ivan or you guys? What do we want to do? Do you guys want to say anything first and then we can go into discussion?
You know, I'm not exactly sure that the issue tonight is your bylaws as much as it is your recommendation, and I just used a word I shouldn't have used, your thoughts about town code revisions.
Okay.
Once you get those town code revisions recommended, there's a draft, you end up having hearings about all that in front of your board and the council, and they take a vote, then you're going to be worrying, I think, about modifying your bylaws to correspond to whatever the code says. I suspect there may be some general questions about your bylaws unrelated to Article 13-28, but that wouldn't be part of this agenda. So,
okay.
Anyway, so I am not sure exactly what discussion there would be at this stage about the bylaws.
Okay. So with that, we'll bring it back to the commission. And commissioners, we can chime in at any time, or we can just take one at a time. We did make a lot of recommendations at our last meeting. Commissioner Evans did have basically a wording revision to the code sent out. Kelly sent that out to everyone. So we can just kind of start with commissioners and go from there. Does anyone want to kick it off? Go for it.
Because we have a Board of Adjustment and we have the Planning and Zoning and a couple of others, are we the only ones that are proposing or suggesting or discussing changing or adding or deleting? Are the rest of the groups just rubber stamping everything? Or are we just the ones?
Chairperson Zurcher and Commissioner Laney, the provision in your code section and in the Board of Adjustments code section are the only ones that have an automatic succession by the vice chair. All of the other commissions and boards do have one-year term periods, which are the same, but they don't have that provision that you have and that the Board of Adjustment has. I don't know of any interest by the Board of Adjustment to make the change in their case, but so in that sense, only those two have that issue, and you're the one that has raised the question here.
Commissioner Rankin?
After our last meeting and the changes that we kind of put forward or what we talked about, being one of the old timers on the board now, it just seems to me like on this board, changing it every year and putting a new chairman in place really puts a strain on that chairman. Because oftentimes what we're going through is, because we have meetings virtually every month, We miss a few, I know we're missing September. But when we do that, oftentimes we have carryovers. Things are still being discussed about different projects and so forth. And if all of a sudden, midstream, we have to turn it over from one chairman to another, I think the biggest thing that I see in there is that I think that our terms need to be a little bit longer, whether it's 2 years or whether it's 3 years. I just think, I understand the notion that we should all have an opportunity to be chairman or a vice chairman, but every year, I really think it puts a strain on us, and because normally we have a lot of people, I shouldn't say normally, but we have a good share of audience participation and audience that comes in to our meetings. And if you haven't been chairman before, and all of a sudden you say, okay, Commissioner Laney, now you're chairman, and are you going to be comfortable with that? And it's, I understand the feeling that you want to give everybody an opportunity, but I think it's too much of a turnover, and I see the biggest thing from me is I would like to see the 2 or 3 year terms, and I understand the re-election every year to still be able to do that, but to just automatically change chairman and vice chair every 12 months, I just don't think that's fair to our board. It's just my...
Commissioner Evans?
I think my thoughts are pretty clear with that bit of amateur lawyering on the wording. It might reflect 35 years of finance negotiations, and I apologize for if there's any bad lawyering in there, Ivan. One thing I would suggest, it says January for the meeting, for the voting, for the election date. That should perhaps change to November. Commissioner Laney pointed out to me that it would be good to dovetail the terms of the commissioners with the election date. So instead of January, November makes more sense, because you may or may not have some new people as of the 1st of November. And to echo Larry, I think that whether it's the town code or the bylaws, you read the duties of the chairman, and it sounds like, basically prosecuting Robert's Rules of Order once a month, and it's a whole lot more than that as the rookie on the commission, and having some mentoring from the chairman through the year and some advice. It's not something I don't think somebody picks up in a year, and if they are good at it, the carryover from year to year, I think, benefits not just the commission, but the town. And with the suggestions some of us have made about sort of an annual sunset subject to 3 years total terms, I think fulfills that objective. But anyway, my thoughts are clear from what I've proposed in the proposed wording.
Commissioner Laney, then Commissioner Griffiths.
I see nowhere in here where it says what month of the year we're supposed to hold our elections. And as I pointed out to Bruce, all of our terms expire on 10/31. All of us. Doesn't make any difference what year, but we all expire on 10/31. So it makes more sense to have an election in November. And nowhere in here does it say, but can we put a specific month in here of the year that we have our elections?
Ivan, did you want to chime in on that one at all?
It can be done as you've described it, lots of different ways. As you know, right now, there's no month because it was always based on the 1 year. And sometimes folks would stay for the whole year and then they wouldn't. And so if they were there for only 6 months, then the idea was that the vice chair would become chair and then they would be there for a year. So that was kind of a rolling period of time, and that's why there was never any specific date. You can do it, of course, the way it's proposed now, where you have a specific date. And so if someone gets to become chair early, then their period of time doesn't last a whole year. It just goes to the finishing the term until the specific date, and then you have the new vote, which is the way council people, that's how their terms work. So you can do it any number of ways. It's simply a matter of what your choice is.
Okay. Commissioner Griffiths?
Thank you, Chair. I support Commissioner Rankin with his comments, along with Mr. Evans and Ms. Laney. I feel that November is a perfect time to do it, and we should establish a month, and that seems like the appropriate one. Not all commission members are cut out to say to be chair and vice chair, and I don't feel that we should put them in those positions where it could possibly be failure. We're here to support, and I don't feel that we should have an automatic rollover that you have to take your turn at being vice chair and then up to chair. That's not a good move. I feel, Arda, how much do you love me? Dearly. I feel that 3 years is, in my heart, too long to be in a chair position. I love 2 years. Then they roll off, and I feel that they should be out of that chair position for a year, and it might be then that they're nominated or there's an opportunity that presents themselves where they can come back on. We should not have anything that prevents someone from being chair multiple times. It just shouldn't be continually rolling in that position. So those are my comments.
And I know it's been mentioned, of course, so if someone serves a year as chair, of course, election occurs the next November, let's just say that. And then are we suggesting then also basically elections take place and that, they reaffirm, if the chair is there, they reaffirm that person serving as chair, or if someone wants to then also step in, if that type of thing?
I think yes, and that should be probably outlined in our article of how we're handling
Okay.
that. They have the option to continue or step down.
Commissioner Rankin?
Also, different than because the council is an elected position, their terms are limited to the distance that they're elected for, and then they have the choice of,
Hey,
again.
Larry, can you speak a little bit more on the
Oh,
mic?
I'm sorry. Then they can run again, whereas with us, we're basically on until we either resign or the council throws us out. So we don't really have, as a board member, we really don't have a time frame. For instance, I know that my term, and I think Matt's term, expires in late '24, October of '24. Wouldn't be fair to go through an election if I'm deciding to resign. I wouldn't want to be, personally, I just wouldn't want to get elected to something and then say, oh no, I'm resigning from the board. It seems like we should have something that, I'm not sure what I'm saying now, I'm confusing myself, but something that gives us an outline of how long we should be on this board. I don't know if any of the other boards, do they have a maximum or a minimum?
Chairman Zurcher and Commissioner Rankin, you've got a 3-year term as it is right now, but there is no limit on how many of those terms you could have. So you've had numerous people that have been on boards for 6, 10, many years. But you do indeed have a term, and you do today have to reapply in order to get a new term, which always gives the council the option to either reappoint you or not. So you do have that limitation. But in terms of what I think you're kind of talking about, you're kind of hoping no one's going to try to run for chair who is going to be gone from the commission potentially in 6 months, because you're thinking that should be a year. But it, like anything else, you might have an expectation of being there for a year, and then after 6 months, circumstances in your life are such that you have to resign, and there's going to need to be a new chair appointed. The only thing is, if you don't have that rolling 1-year approach, if you have a set day when you're going to always have an election, that means that someone could theoretically be a chair for 2 months and then be up for election because you happen to hit that November date. But again, it can be done numerous ways.
So it seems like we're in agreement that we would like to still have the elections every year, but not be limited to the 1 year where automatically you're gone. That, I think we're all in agreement on that, aren't we?
And the thing I drafted, if you might, contemplates what I called an abbreviated term, so that if we do have elections every year in November, and November is set, and someone, leaves the state who was chairman in April, they would serve till November, or the replacement would serve till November, and they'd be able to do 2 more terms if they indicated that they wanted to, and if the commission indicated that the commissioners wanted them to continue to serve. So I think that kind of solves that issue, and I would be not all that attracted to something where the election date changes based on a change in the chair. I think the abbreviated term works a little better. It's a better system, but maybe I just think that because I drafted it. But,
Okay, any other discussion on this? Or even, we can even discuss other issues in the bylaws?
Mr. Chair, I feel that we should probably start to pin down some sort of agreed upon verbiage before we move to other discussion items.
Okay. So I think again, this is not, we have no action, we're not voting on anything, but I think there's consensus that the election date would be November. I think it's, there's probably some for 2 years, some for 3 years. I personally would agree with Commissioner Griffiths that 2 years, I think, is a good time frame, and then after 2 years, the vice chair could become chair, or anybody can really become chair after that, and then basically the person that serves as chair has to wait a year before they can even go back to chair. I think that's, I think from what I'm hearing, there's probably consensus on that as well. So I'm trying to think of anything else really that, as opposed to, but no, and then of course no automatic from chair to vice chair.
So I support that, Mr. Chair. I feel it would be important maybe for Attorney Legler to share with us verbally how that will be presented.
Chairman Zurcher and Commissioner Griffiths, this is a work, I get in trouble when Gilbert hears me call it a work study. This is a study session, so obviously you're not taking any votes, you're not making any formal recommendations. My understanding was that you would be kind of informally putting together either points or actual language and handing it to staff. Staff would then work with the legal department and the manager and those folks to kind of put a document together. Ultimately, you can't amend the zoning code until you've actually had a hearing in front of both your board and the town council. So ultimately, no final change would be made until you've put a draft ordinance together, you notice it out there, you hold a public hearing in front of your board, you make a recommendation to the town council, it then goes to the town council, they hold their hearing, and then they would either agree or modify in terms of their first reading, second reading, and then adoption.
What's the time frame, Ivan? So I know we're not having a meeting in September, so our next meeting would be in October. So what would be the time frame for at least amending the code?
Well, you know, there is no flat time frame,
Okay.
obviously. You've got some folks who are out there working on the zoning code right now. You've got, his name went out of my head. Frank, thank you. Don't tell him I forgot his name. So, but I'm getting old enough that I have a good excuse. But Frank, as you know, is working on an entire zoning code modification, and that's probably going to be a process that will go through June of next year. He's working on certain things now that he's going to present to the council as some preliminary. They've kind of broken it up rather than having it be one big process. So this kind of a change could be added at any point in that process.
Mr. Evans?
I think as long as we've started it, we should prosecute it fairly vigorously so it doesn't get forgotten. I'd also volunteer to kind of reword what I had come up with in consideration of the consensus tonight with some of the other different things, and maybe send it through Kelly to distribute so I don't get in trouble with open meeting laws again. If that's acceptable, I can do that in a couple of weeks.
And also, I think Kelly has a lot of the notes that we've, from our discussions, that we can easily probably type something up and get it distributed.
It'd be fine.
Would that be acceptable to everyone? All right.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and discuss any other bylaw changes or anything else in the bylaws that anyone has concerns or wants to see changes on. Commissioner Griffiths?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Under Article 8, number B, I was a little confused with this one. It says study sessions will be held 1 hour prior to each regularly scheduled meeting unless a different date and time is adopted. We don't have a study session 1 hour prior to each regularly scheduled meeting. I think there should be some verbiage added in there, possibly study sessions when necessary or study sessions when applicable. So that was one of my comments.
Can I add on to that real quick?
Absolutely, Chair.
And I think also that, if the chair's hearing it from other commissioners, the chair can definitely request a special meeting or a study session. Even if 3 commissioners approach staff, and 3 commissioners can actually also request a study session or even a special meeting. So that might be part of that, add additional verbiage.
And some of that verbiage is in D.
Yes.
So maybe study sessions when necessary or called for by the chair,
Or other the 3 members, yeah.
applicable number of members.
Yes.
So that was a comment with that. Under F, unless otherwise voted by a quorum of the members, the meeting agenda format shall be as follows, and it lists 9 items. We don't always have an executive session. The way I read F is that that will always be an agenda item. Is that something to executive sessions when required, or am I like overthinking this?
Well, no, because from what I'm understanding, and Ivan, correct me, but if there's specific legal questions on any item, at any time, an executive session could actually be called for, if that's correct, Ivan?
Mr. Chairman and Commissioner Griffiths, in any circumstance where you have on your agenda the possibility of an executive session being called, you can then hold an executive session. We generally don't use that approach in Prescott Valley. We generally expect, if we're going to have an executive session, we've planned for it, and we go put the very specific verbiage in our agenda. Let me just begin with the fact that when it says format, it doesn't mean you will have these every meeting. All it is saying is if you were to have a public hearing, it will be the third, it will come after the recording of members. If you were to have a subdivision plat review, it will come after a public hearing. If you were to have an executive session, it will come after recent communications, announcements, calendar. So what this is really doing is telling you the order by which things are to be done, but it isn't telling you that you must have one of those things in every meeting.
Perfect, thank you.
You bet.
I have two more, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry.
Go for it, no, go for it.
Under amendments, number A, Article X, amendments to these bylaws may be made by 2/3 vote of the commission following a 14-day written notice of proposed changes. I wasn't clear on that, a 14-day public notice, written notice? What does a 14-day written notice mean?
Mr. Chair, my understanding of that has to do with the notices that are sent out by staff to the commission members, but I defer to staff if that's not the way they've understood that.
In written could also be by electronic communication as well, so,
So
yes.
the written notice would go where? To the commission members?
Yes.
I believe this is referring to when you get your packets from staff getting ready for your meeting. And I think that would simply be the amount of time that should have been given to you so that you could consider it before the meeting. That would be my understanding of it, but I would defer to staff if that's not the way it's been looked at.
Chairman, Commissioners, I believe it's after it's been noticed as an agenda item. You know, we put out a public notice of the agenda, so then the bylaws, any amendments to it be a 2/3 vote at that next hearing, so 14 days. Is that correct, Kelly?
14 days is when we put the packets out, 14
Yeah.
days ahead.
So is that a 14-day notice then to us as commissioners that we're having a meeting, or a public notice?
It's, from what Kelly's saying, it's both.
Public. I feel that the word public maybe should be put in
Yeah,
there.
that could be, that's good.
Perfect. And then, Article XC, it says passed, approved, and adopted by the Planning and Zoning Commission of the Town of Prescott Valley. That date obviously will change.
That is correct.
Perfect.
Anybody else have any other changes, proposed changes, or comments, questions on the existing bylaws?
Well covered.
Okay. All right, so seeing none, we will move on to item number B on the agenda, 4B on the agenda, which is commission and staff expectations. And Donna, since you're right there, I'll put you on the spot.
I'm here.
You know, you're relatively new, but, you know, kind of why I wanted to have this on the agenda is, you know, what are staff's expectations of the commission?
And Chair and Commissioners, that's very good. And staff's expectations just generally is when the packets go out, cases are listed, reports are gone out. If you have any misunderstanding or don't understand something, to contact staff. We're here at your service to help you understand before you make your decisions or recommendations, that you fully understand what it means. Sometimes I know we use a lot of planning jargon or town code references, and honestly, we're here. If you don't understand, please call us, because we want to make sure you've got enough information so that you can project what your thoughts are at the dais. So that would be number one, first and foremost, is just to make sure those packets are understood, and if we're missing something, or if we have too much and it's getting too much, because I come from municipalities where staff has provided everything on every case, traffic, packets and everything. It got to be 100 pages. And the commissioners finally had to say, this is enough. We can understand how, it was in the past, going as far as summaries and what is expected, whether it's a plat or whatnot. You don't have to go into all the details. But if you prefer that, that's something that could be out there. Or if you have questions on some of the traffic analysis that you have, we're available going through Kelly, and we'll get all of you the answer, not just one, but it'll come back to everybody.
Commissioner Rutherford?
We frequently ask for the traffic study analysis. I think that's something we like to see.
And I think that's where we can go into commission expectations, but we'll get there in just a minute. Anything else under staff expectations from you, Ernest, Kelly, even Ivan? You want to chime in on legal expectations from the commission?
Mr. Chairman and commission members, one of the things at the legal department that we want to avoid is giving you the impression that we are trying to tell you what you should do. You are the ones who have been appointed. We're there to be legal advisors. We feel that same way about the council. We try not to impose our own sense of things. That said, we recognize that, we can be helpful, and that sometimes what is done seems to turn on whatever advice is being given. But you should understand that our desire is to be advisors and to give what help we can, but to avoid any sense in the audience or on the board that somehow we should be helping make the decision. So. Having said that, we're just anxious to be of use.
Griffiths.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Donna and Ivan, inasmuch as you're acting as advisors for us, I do know that I in the past have called Ernest with questions, and Donna and Ivan. Is it easier, and maybe should we start to field and send our questions to you through the appropriate chair, where now we can all get those questions and answered? Or are we okay if we willy-nilly call and Bruce sends an email and Matt picks up the phone and call? I just wanted to know your thoughts.
I want to piggyback off of that, because there are multiple times, because we don't want to violate open meeting law.
Right.
But there's quite a few times when I hear, I'll call in to staff, and other commissioners have called in similar topics. I don't know if that's something where, staff wants to then potentially send out an email to all the commissioners,
Right.
With, maybe a little bit more clarification or answers to those questions that we may have. That's just because we do get that quite a bit. Other commissioners will be calling you, and sometimes it's on the same topics.
To go along with that, it seems like then there are times when we are in meeting, and I'll just use me as an example, is that something may come up, and I may ask a question, and other board members have already gone to staff and had that explained to them, and maybe I should have, but I didn't understand it at the time. So I think that if we can get better feedback there, it keeps us from looking like one board member knows what's going on and the other four don't, you know, that sort of thing. So I think anytime that we get and I think you'd have to make that decision as to what you feel is an important question that needs to be clarified, that then that something comes out to all the boards so that by the time we get here, we're kind of all on the same boat. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yes, Chairman Zerker and Commissioners, I think we could handle this by, it's called a rule of 7. And how you would do it, you get your packets and maybe you set a guideline. Let's say you get your packets and whatever an allowed time for you think is normal, that you all come with your questions and maybe go through the chair and get it to our staff. And then we'll go through everybody's questions, answer them, and then rule of 7, everybody gets all the answers on everything that was thought of. Because one of you may think of something and somebody else may not have, but have asked another question. This way we can organize the questions through Kelly. Staff will look at them and give you the appropriate answers and backup documents, should that be. It's called the rule of 7.
Mr. Chair, I think you made a very important point when you talked about being careful about open meeting law.
Absolutely.
And there isn't really a perfect way to do this. Sometimes the reason why you may have one person talk to staff and get an answer back to that one person is our desire to be so careful about not violating the open meeting law. If in fact staff is getting calls from folks asking questions, staff will want to make sure that their memorandum or report or whatever you call it that goes into your packet deals with whatever they are aware of that you may have concerns about. And those go out to you with enough time that if a number of you then call staff and say, well, I need further clarification, they can be careful to send out to all of you an amended report that then becomes part of your packet. And they can do that anytime, you know, leading up to the meeting. I would just be careful. You've always got to be careful that you're not talking to each other about your questions, or that you're not compiling your questions and then sending them around, or that even staff is sending them around so that anybody might think you're actually conducting a meeting electronically.
And I mean, you raise a very good point, because typically there's the rule of 3. Really, you can only speak to, you know, two others, because 4 makes an, you know, a quorum. Also, you know, with I've noticed when we send out emails from staff, it goes to all the commissioners as opposed to maybe like Kelly sending it to Kelly and blind seeing. So commissioners aren't tempted to reply all. Because that when you reply all, then you actually create a serial open meeting violation. So that's just something that, you know, consider. But yeah, you know, definitely. Also, if we do get emails, never reply all.
Right.
Commissioner Laney. We'll get, and again, this is just kind of staff expectations. We'll get into kind of what Commissioner Rutherford was going for, what our expectations are from staff.
I am a hands-on person, and I noticed that. Oh, you can't hear me? I'm a hands-on person, and I noticed that we can request from staff a field trip of anything on the agenda. And I don't want to impose upon staff, and I have done it on my own, but if we really want to ask staff questions about a specific item on the agenda, is it not an imposition if we request that we have a field trip?
Very good question, thank you, and Chairman Zerker and Commissioners. the good news is we're getting more planners on staff. So in about 3 or 4 months, we should have 3 more, so where we could cover. Right now, my planner is Ernest, and you can only imagine all the dockets and applications that are coming in. But once we get settled, we would be happy, especially if there's cases, maybe we take the group, everybody, because you want to really know the details of what's being submitted. And it's then the senior planner or someone who's really familiar with the case, who's ever got the case, would be able to explain to you what you need to know and answer your questions. So hopefully long-term, that'll be moving forward, something that we can accommodate. But certainly happy to do so.
And then I can tell you, Donna, that a couple years ago, we had a field trip, and it didn't go very well. And so, and I say that because Ivan could, tell us why, but we didn't follow open meeting laws. And there was some issues with...
Mr. Chairman, yes, and Commissioner Laney, that always is the issue. It's, again, open meeting law. And what you end up having to do is tell the public, exactly when you're going to meet and exactly where you're going to be so that they can be there if they choose. And in that circumstance, we had an issue raised because they wanted to know what had been talked about inside the van when no public was there. And so the point was you had to say, well, we don't and didn't talk about it in the van, and we waited until you were there after we got out of the van so that you could hear us talk. And so those are the kinds of issues that get raised in those types of, because you're still in a meeting. It can be done, but it does take quite a bit of work.
And if I may, it might be better to take groups of 3 as opposed to the full commission on field trips.
And we would have to set the guidelines, and Ivan has brought up some really good points too, as far as the ride over, do we all meet there? So, we would want to outline it just to make sure we're all aware and on the same page as the
And, and of course, we're talking about field inspections, and maybe we just need to amend our bylaws to basically make it a rule of 3 as opposed to the full commission. So just, something to consider for the future.
Yeah.
Commissioner Evans? Yes.
Getting back to the issue of not unduly burdening staff with repetitive questions, one other way perhaps to handle that, and I've put it in an email to you a while back, is that perhaps we could have a password-protected portal where anything that's on an agenda, I understand how we shouldn't have access to something that might not be coming to the commission ever or 8 months from now, that's too much. But anything that is on the agenda, some commissioners might like to get into the weeds for hours and hours and hours, and we don't want to bother staff with all those questions. Some of us might want to just trust the overview of the staff memo. But if we had a password-protected portal, and only while it's on the agenda, even after it's gone, perhaps we don't have access to that anymore, where we get access to the documentation that comprises the file for a particular item that's on our agenda. And, we can wade through a TIA if we want to without having to call Ernest or a future planner and impose on their time. So I'd be happy to discuss that item and the 2 or 3 others I had in that email a while ago with you as a possible solution.
Chairman Zerker, I'll defer to Ivan because I do know the city has policies and security on our systems, but I'll let you.
And in terms of
Give us
security, I'm
guidance.
sure I'm not the person to opine on that, but one of the challenges you always have is if things have been given to you in a packet, then of course the public will have access to that packet as well. And so the challenge might be if you have information that perhaps the public hasn't received, again, would that be raised as an issue? It can be worked on. It can be talked about. I'm sure it can be considered.
Something actually, because I know, we see the HTML agendas, the full packets on the website. I don't know, because certain packets are going to be huge. And I know we don't want to be printing everything out in that particular instance, and maybe there's a way for us to be able to see things on the computer a little bit better. Just something to think about.
I can look into it definitely and report back, but in my history of it, it's a security with our systems issue.
Yeah.
And it's not against just any one person, it's just anyone outside employment.
Now, would it be appropriate, and this would be kind of a legal question for you, Ivan, if it's on the agenda and we can actually say to because it's like a lot of pages or what have you, to the commission, see HTML packet online, would that be appropriate, or, if that would be something that we could all do?
Chairman Zurcher, I think that could work. Yeah, I think you could work on something like that.
Because, and any other questions with regard to staff expectations? Comments? We'll move on to commissioner expectations of staff, the commission expectations of staff. And Commissioner Rutherford did bring up a very valid point. We've been really pressing for a long time to see TIA information. And I look at it this way, the more information we have, the better educated the commission is to basically render a decision or to make a decision. And so TIAs typically, because traffic is a very important issue, I kind of goes into one of our, like the public safety element of the commission. It's one of those things that we really have some oversight on. And, I know TIAs aren't necessarily, and you can, discuss it, here in just a second, that sometimes we don't require the applicant to, necessarily do it and have it ready for a preliminary development plan. But again, the more information we have, the better off we are. And if there's a way to kind of, I would also like to see packets almost to the final, as close to a final version of a project or something as, possible to us, and then go from there.
Commissioner Zurcher, and I apologize, I have a friend whose last name is Zurcher, and I keep on wanting to call you my friend.
It's Zurcher,
Zurcher.
so,
Zurcher.
yeah, but it's
Thank
Zurcher.
you. And a very good point, and what we're doing now and what will be at the September 7th hearing with council is we're going to start having all the applicants give us full support documents up front instead of later. So that will help us assist you because we'll get everything early on. And now I'll add that to my presentation because it'll also help you now that I know you've been asking for that. But we want to have everything so that we can all make decisions in a way that it's knowledgeable with the facts versus the what-ifs because we don't have the information. And I know in the past, correct me if I'm wrong, Ernest, but the TIAs weren't always here right up front.
Yeah, no, definitely, I know that. Anybody else? Mike?
Getting the mic. One thing that I have an issue with is that we have had numerous approvals or applications for approval, and they have so many conditions on them. And most of the conditions are lack of information that's in the packet. And we can't make a valued decision when we've got all these conditions on it. So if we could keep the conditions of approval to a minimum, it would make it easier for us and for you.
And that goes back to what I just said, that we're going to get everything up front so those conditions won't be there because we'll have all our information up front.
Good, thank you.
Commissioner Evans?
Yeah, I've got a couple of comments here, but before I make them, I just want to do a big shout out to Ernest. He's been carrying a heck of a load. There's been 3 directors in 2 years. He does it very professionally. Mm-hmm. He's incredibly responsive in a very busy situation, and he does it with a sense of humor. So Ernest, thank you, sir, very much. Maybe it's something about being the rookie and perhaps having some unrealistic expectations of our role and the way that the commission's supposed to prosecute their business. I have felt through the year that I've been here that on a number of occasions we've been kind of jammed to make a decision really quickly. I won't go through the examples. I've shared them with one member of staff, and it's no sense, no benefit to relitigate them here. But rezoning is not just a slow process, it's glacial. I don't think there's any emergency rezoning matters that we have to look at. And you can't wait forever either to have a perfect packet. But I do feel that in not many, but several circumstances, we've kind of been jammed and forced to make a decision when we didn't have all the information, and there was no good reason we couldn't have waited a month. So I'll just make that. And also, we're well aware of the constraints we face, and they're legitimate constraints, whether it's the general plan, the town code, Arizona revised statutes, and also our obligation to give a full hearing to community people who come before us. So it's a fairly complex sort of thing, and there's no place there for any radical activists on this commission. I don't think any of us want to be, and none of us are. And finally, I think we want to be consulted, not coddled, so please don't misunderstand my concerns. And Ivan, I don't want to start an argument, but in the training session in June, we were told at least twice that we were admonished to basically do what staff tells us to do. And there were some caveats there, I recognize that. But I hope that's not the 95% of the time we will, because the staff recommendations make sense. Anyway, that's it for me.
Ivan, did you want to chime in? When it comes to recommendations, I know from what I'm understanding, staff has to make a recommendation. And I know we've had projects, and I'm sure there's going to be projects in the future that are not popular. And they may have, they may fit a lot of, things within general plan and so on and so forth. I just want to encourage staff that it's okay to make a neutral recommendation, or even, if it's not a good project, especially if, there's, talk from the, third floor to second floor that there's just not a good fit. I think definitely I want to encourage staff not to be afraid to make either a neutral recommendation or, hey, we just don't think this is a good idea. And I realize probably we're never going to see that type of situation, but maybe, we might see neutral recommendations. And so I definitely think I would encourage that of course, maybe it's just not appropriate to say, yes, we approve everything, we recommend everything that comes through the commission, but I know that typically everything that, has been in the past has always been well reviewed. So, but there's been a few things where definitely I just said, why did this even get to us?
And that's a good question, and especially from the public, Chairman Churcher and commissioners. But I will tell you and let you know, we have projects that we deny and don't bring to you. So we do have that, and many of our projects are by right, but they're bringing it through for a permit or something, and it has to go through a public hearing. So we try to navigate that the best we can for you. But I agree, there's some projects they're allowed by right on some, and I may not agree with it, but we can't afford to have lawsuits either. So
Could you actually say, again, it's by matter of right, but maybe not popular, so neutral, staff
I've
isn't
never
taking a
seen
position
that.
on this?
I've never seen that, but I'm happy to do that if that's.
And again, that's
I
something
defer to
I don't
legal
want.
on that.
Because I think if it's neutral, then it comes to the commission can weigh everything and make a recommendation of approval or denial.
Yeah.
I do know, and I'm Chairman Zurcher, you know this as well, that the county, unincorporated Yavapai County, as one of their commissioners, every item they do come forward with a recommendation of support and/or a denial. There have been a few instances where they've had a neutral recommendation. And I will also say that in multiple cases, when they've come forward with an approval, it's been either a split commission vote or a denial. So it's It's a difficult one to handle.
Commissioner Rankin?
The other thing that I think I've noticed is that 10 years ago when we started, Prescott Valley had still a lot of potential sites out there. And now it seems like the sites are kind of fine-tuning a little bit. And so they're getting more complicated, and which brings out more anti or pro against that project that we didn't have 10 years ago. I mean, it was kind of
Yeah.
happy-go-lucky, not that manner, because we had good projects that came online. But I think as we go on now, the projects that are brought to us are going to be more complicated every month, every year. They're just going to, it's just going to be that way. I don't see any way around it. And so that is going to put more pressure on us and more pressure on you and your staff. But I do see that it's getting, I use the word complicated. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but to make those votes and listen to all the people and get their input, it's making it, it does put more pressure on us. And any help that we can get from staff is appreciated, because it's a harder job than I think it was 10 years ago. It definitely is.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Rutherford.
I believe that historically, this board has been seen as a rubber stamp because the planning department did such an excellent job of working with the developer, letting him know if something wouldn't fly so they don't waste their time and money. And they brought us only projects that could be approved. And I think the business about the limited available land making it more difficult has, and you have more limited resources than we did a few years ago as far as staff goes. And so I think that's why some of these things are voted down that might be good projects, because we don't have all the information that we need to make the right or possibly the best decision.
No, I completely agree. I just had a question. You want to say anything else? You were leaning in, so that's why
I want to, I heard Mr. Legler loud and clear at the beginning of our meeting that he said this was general discussion for bylaws unrelated to Article 1328. At what point in time, please, will we be able to bring forward comments and concerns over 1328? Because I have a lot.
I'm not following what you're saying.
I was told, I heard tonight our general discussion was going to be on the bylaws and unrelated conversation to Article 1328. Can we have Article 1328 conversation and comments this evening, or do we hold off on that?
Chairperson Zurcher and Councilmember Griffiths, I'm still confused because I understood that we had had our discussion about the section dealing with the chair and the appointment of the chair in Article 1328.
We did, but I have other sections in 1328 that are of a concern to me.
Oh, well, those are obviously not on the agenda tonight,
Okay, so
right.
those are all on hold until what point in time?
Well, to be honest, it would be at some point when perhaps you've worked with your chair and the staff about wanting to hold a public hearing to make recommendations about Article 1328. Right now, the zoning code is being reviewed, and there are a lot of issues out there that are being discussed already. So perhaps you'll just want to dovetail with that process.
Yeah.
Even I think probably getting together with Frank or emailing Frank with your proposed changes or comments wouldn't be a bad idea. With that, are there any other comments?
I'd just like to clarify, the agenda does say review planning and zoning commission bylaws as compared to town code article 1328. So,
That was only in relation to the bylaws and this issue of the chair being adopted. That's what that was referring to.
That's what confused me, so I went ahead and read the whole thing.
so I'm just trying to think of how we could help this out, if to save time, or if she wants to send.
I can save it and come forward
memo.
later. It's
I
okay.
don't think, I mean, because anybody for that matter, if anyone, any commissioner has, you know, concerns about the code, any code really for that matter, that any zoning code that needs to, they think that needs to potentially be changed, or if there's poor wording and so forth, I would just encourage you to reach out to staff and go from there.
Perfect.
Anything else for the good of the cause this evening? Well, I do have a special announcement. This is my last meeting as a member of this commission. I'm going to be stepping down next week. And so with us not having a meeting in September, this will be my last meeting as a member of this commission. I've served here for almost 9.5 years. It'll be 10. It would have been 10 years next, next spring. I can just tell you from the bottom of my heart, it has been an honor and a privilege to serve with this existing, the commission that we have right now, and other past commissioners that have come and gone. I want to say, in particular, to staff, you know, Ernest, I want to echo what Commissioner Evans said earlier. You've been definitely doing a lot, and I just appreciate everything that you've done. Donna, I haven't spent a whole lot of time with you, but just, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, everything that you're going to be bringing to the table. And just, you know, other past directors, planners, and so forth. I can't compliment you enough. And what you do, you put up with a lot, and I can't thank you enough. Same thing with administrative staff, Kelly. Just really appreciate it, everything you do. And legal, I mean, it's just been recent that legal started to attend our meetings, and it's been something that we wanted for a while, and we got it. So I want to just say thank you to the legal department. But again, it has been an honor and privilege to serve with you, to serve the town, and just want to say thank you. So with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We stand adjourned.